Welcome back, everybody, to the virtual summit on sales prospecting. Today, I've got Collin Stewart from Predictable Revenue. Really excited to talk to you, Collin, about how to consistently get better at prospecting. Without further ado, Collin, do you mind maybe giving the people who don't know you a quick overview on your background and what you guys do at Predictable Revenue?
Yeah, for sure. So at Predictable Revenue, we've obviously wrote a book. My co-founder was employee 150 at Salesforce, built this prospecting methodology out of what they do there. Right now, we help companies build remote sales teams. A little bit about myself. I've been running this part of this company for about 7 years now. I started a different company, merged with Aaron in 2015. Before that, I was a closer for 10 years. Sold everything from cell phone contracts, commercial and residential roofing, diesel generators, kitchen cabinetry to high rises, like everything under the sun. Lots of stuff that came in boxes. I spent a ton of time prospecting and doing it very, very poorly.
All right. So you definitely got better since then, right?
I would like to hope so, but I don't know. Well, you tell me after the end of this recording.
Okay, sounds good. So I think, my opinion on prospecting and just sales in general is these days it's evolving faster and faster. Technology being a factor, right? Both from like the consumer, like I'm on my phone less making phone calls and more on my phone doing emails, SMS, Messenger and new technology, but also from technologies that help salespeople like Chorus, Gong, and so many other things that can kind of help people be more efficient, effective, learn, grow faster. I guess in your opinion, what are ways people, tried and true ways people can continue to grow like their skill set?
For sure. I think one of the things that we try and live by here at Predictable Revenue is we've kind of got three different ways of looking at it. There's the design, which is like before you jump into something, you want to have a quick, you want to look at, am I designing this correctly? Then there's the sort of execution, right? So are we, while we're in it, are we doing a really good job? Are we constantly, iterating and getting a little bit better? And then on the sort of post-execution, there's the coaching side, which is sort of revisiting, working with your individual team members and helping them get a little bit better every single time. And so the things I'll share today are things that we're actually doing that we've implemented at Predictable Revenue.
Awesome. So let's start with the design part. Like how does that work for you guys?
Yeah. One of the things that we've noticed, I mean, obviously the book came out 10 years ago, give or take. And it's obvious, like the industry has obviously changed quite a bit ever since. 10 years ago, you could send 100 emails and get a 30% response rate because it was a unique and novel way of reaching new prospects. Fast forward to today, sales often outreach of both. Oh, sorry, dude. I just realized I didn't. Yeah. Do you want to retake that one?
Yeah, we'll have to start because you stopped. But yeah, you can mention competitors. All good.
Yeah.
Just maybe include us. It's all good. It doesn't matter.
Sorry.
No, you're good. It doesn't. I mean, this is all like. I don't care what the tool is at the education. So, but hang on. While we stopped here, let me just
Sure.
Tone this fucking sun down. It's cloudy here, like on and off, like intermittent clouds for me. So it's like I'm bright and then not bright.
I have the same thing shooting right up at here. And like, I'm not going to put makeup on because like, I hate putting stuff on my face and so I'm just like, in a few minutes, it'll go like super dark because the sun will move or the cloud will move.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I get a different way of phrasing that. I don't need to bring up.
Okay. I'm going to just take it back from the question then.
Sure.
So, all right. So let's start with the design part. How does that work at Predictable Revenue or what's your approach on this?
Yeah. So one of the things that is pretty obvious is, at least to us, is Predictable Revenue came out over 10 years ago. And so much has changed between then. If you look at the number of people that were sending emails as a primary method of prospecting back then, there were very few. In fact, it was probably mostly Salesforce and a few other companies that were doing it. Fast forward to today, there are, I don't have any great data on this, but I'm guessing 10x, the number of SDRs and probably 100x the amount or 1,000x the amount of email, right? If you look at programs like Mailshake and, all the competitors that are in the space, it has never been easier to send as a salesperson to send so many emails, right? And the effect that's had on our buyers is, well, it's the channels become, or the inbox has become a lot more crowded, right? And so if there's one thing that you need to do when you're looking at how am I designing my my sequences in my playbook, is you really have to test. You can't just take the same email templates that came out of predictable revenue 10 years ago and worked back then. You have to sort of consistently, or we've had to consistently test and iterate. We're a company that helps other companies, that builds sales teams for other companies. So a lot of the times we're building out the playbook. We got to figure out, what is that mix of channels? Is it phone, social, email? Is there direct mail? Is there something else? Can we send them a homing pigeon to try and figure out, like, get them to answer the phone, or, you know, get back to us? And so one of the things that we've launched recently was Lpl Labs, right? And this is something that probably isn't unique to us. And I encourage everybody that has a prospecting team to steal. And it's just a way of thinking about, how do we consistently get better, right? And if I think about the way that we're approaching it, is we have sort of 4 stages. There's the ideation phase, where we're saying, okay, what are all the things that we've heard? You know, we've seen these blog posts, we've read these, seen these blog posts, we've listened to these podcasts, we've been on these webinars. What are the ideas that we want to test, right? What are the new things? What are the things that we can do that we feel like might add some value to the process? Then basically we go into the design stage, right? So what are the variables? What are the pieces that we need to isolate, right? And one of the keys here is making sure that we're not just throwing darts in the dark, is to actually document quite a bit of this. And so we're looking at sort of, what are the hypotheses that we want to test? You know, what is the proper way for us to test? What is the procedure that we're going to follow, right? And so that's kind of the design stage. Then we want to replicate it. We don't want to just see, okay, it was this one list from this one source or this one customer type. We want to be able to replicate it across the board. In our case, that's across a couple of clients. In your customers' cases, it might be across a couple of verticals. It might be across a couple of different product lines, right? And then you want to scale it out, right? And so once you've validated that, hey, we've got something that's working, we want to roll it out to the entire team. And so that's when we look at, how do we build this into our playbook? Typically it results in a lunch and learn, the addition to the playbook, you know, sort of the people that own the playbook get together and say, okay, what is this process? Okay, now that's official. Lunch and learn, share it up with the team, and have some follow-up training sessions. So that's really the first piece. I am not a scientist. We have some people on the team that are very good at following the scientific methodology, the scientific method. And so they're very meticulous about how they're documenting each of these tests and the variables they're looking to test and the outcomes that they're looking to, that their outcomes they're looking for. And so the best part of this program is that we've had some really crazy ideas that we've tested. And we've had some perfectly sane ideas that we've tested. And we've had some shocking surprises of things that we were 100% sure were going to work and didn't. We had some things that seemed like minor little tweaks that actually had a really big impact. And so we wouldn't have been able to figure out that, we wouldn't have known if this data, or if these results were real or not, had we not followed the design thinking approach to making sure that we're documenting everything ahead of time. We're starting these experiments with a hypothesis and a goal in mind, and then we're sharing the results. And we celebrate the results as a team, positive or negative. It's always helping us learn something. Just like a cold call, right? It's, even if you connect to somebody and you learn something, that's better than not making any calls at all.
Yeah, totally makes sense. I love it. And you're like, hey, I'm not the scientist, I'm not the data, the math person here, but somebody is. And that's awesome, because you don't necessarily need to be that person. You just need to have some form of that on your team.
100%. And
yeah,
I'd say
you can be a contractor.
Exactly. And I would totally encourage everybody to have a look at who's the right person to own this. For us, it wasn't our SDR leader. We had somebody who was a senior SDR, and we said, hey, now you're the owner of Outbound Labs. We had our product manager participate. He's trained in design thinking and a bunch of other sort of certifications that I won't go into right now, but basically helped us map out the process, and then trained up that senior SDR on how to do it. And now she's responsible for managing all the tests, even though all the other SDRs are responsible for contributing and running their own experiments. She's actually quarterbacking everything. So she's the head of our Outbound Labs program now. And
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Go ahead. You were saying something?
I was going to say, I think the only way that we've been able to make it work was having that one person own it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Definitely need that owner to move everything forward, right?
Yeah.
All the pieces you got going on. Let's talk about the execution part. I think I feel like a lot of people just jump to the execution without the design or the what they're gonna do. They just go and say, I'm gonna email a bunch of folks, or you know what, I got this hot prospect list. I'm gonna mail them. I'm gonna call them. I'm gonna do everything. But you gotta go back to the design. So once you got the design done, you're ready to execute. Walk me through that process. What does that look like?
So I like to look at, when we're talking metrics, I like to look at inputs, outputs, and results. So inputs, the activity that you're putting in. Outputs are the sort of what's happening with that activity. So let's say it's the number of emails sent, the number of calls I made, the number of people I added on LinkedIn. And then the outputs are basically your response rates and the meetings that were booked. And then the results is essentially, what did that lead to, right? And I think along the way, I want to say sort of on my journey of, going from salesperson to sales manager, well, entrepreneur along the way, but, in this context, sales manager, there were really two meetings that helped me feel like I was adding value. And the first one was the pipeline review that we did with the team. And the second one was call review. And I do each of these meetings every single week with my team. I'm just in the process. We've hired a sales manager who's awesome. I'm in the process of handing that off to him. But for the last year and a bit, I've ran both of these meetings with our account exec and SDR teams. And basically the pipeline review at the beginning of the week helps us sort of establish the plan. So are there any deals that we're falling behind on? I know I've been in a ton of pipeline review scenarios, and the thing that made this one really productive was having a common language. And so there's two pieces that I really needed to add that we didn't have a common language on, that I thought we did, but didn't actually, when it came down to it, everybody had slightly different definitions. And the first piece was the pipeline stages, and the second piece was my qualification criteria. And making sure that for the pipeline stages, there were customer verifiable outcomes, right? So in order to move from one stage to the next, here's the only piece of information that needs to exist. And it's something factual. It's something that it's not an opinion, right? I know this, I know they've said this, they believe that this is going to happen. Therefore I can defend why it's in that stage, right?
What were the two things again? One more time.
First was the pipeline, sort of the pipeline stages. The second piece was the qualification methodology. And so with the pipeline stages, making sure you've got the customer verifiable outcome at each stage, and then clearly defining. And so that's one piece. And then that's how you organize your CRM system. Those are the stages. And then along the way, you sort of overlay your qualification criteria. And we chose to use MEDDIC. I met Jamie Buss from Zendesk, and she showed me her qualification methodology and how she forecasts, $500 million in revenue down to 1% every quarter, which was super impressive. And so we follow the MEDDIC system, which I know she wasn't the founder of, but it's sort of having those common definitions that I set out and said, hey team, this is what we follow. And then using that pipeline review meeting to reinforce that. So, hey, it took a couple weeks, maybe a month, where it was pretty rocky, where the reps, they didn't have this, they didn't know that, they weren't asking this question. But after 2 months, we were, flowing and I was able to get up to speed on deals like I'd never had before. And so in that pipeline review, it wasn't just me sitting back going, well, why haven't you made progress on this? Right? It allowed me to get in and see inside the tornado and say, okay, why do you think do nothing is off the table? Or, tell me about why you think you've got a really strong economic buyer, a relationship with the economic buyer, right? It provided so much more context to those calls, as opposed to just sitting back and be like, why hasn't this closed? Why isn't there more here? It took me from sort of like version 1, which is just looking down at the high level, to being right in it. And then the sort of second meeting that was really good. It helped me as a manager feel like I understood our pipeline. I could feel what's coming in the future. The second piece that really helped was call review and consistent call review. And this isn't me sitting there looking at their calls and saying, oh, this one was an A, B, or C. This was having our reps. So we created this try and create this atmosphere of it's okay to screw up, right? And the only way that we can get better is by looking at the things that we screwed up. And we're a little sarcastic bunch, and so we give each other a tough time. And we always, I always ask the team, bring your worst call, and we're going to make fun of you, and we're going to rip it apart in a fun and challenging way. And we're not just making fun of them the whole time. There's a little sarcasm involved. Generally, anytime I'm involved, I can't help it. But these meetings we basically do them every Friday afternoon, and occasionally when they're tough, we'll have a couple of beers, and it's basically the reps bring in their worst call, and here's why it was my worst call, or here's why I'm confused about it, right? And it's not always your most poorly executed call. Sometimes it's just the one where you're like, you know what? I thought this one was for sure go ahead, and then they ghosted me. So I don't know what I did wrong. Let's go back and figure it out, because obviously something's wrong. So help me figure that out. And between those two meetings, I went from, it was sort of like the Wizard of Oz. In the very beginning, everything's in black and white. And then, I don't know, a few minutes in, it transitions to color, and you're like, whoa, there was so much detail that I was missing before, that just by having this common language and then giving the reps the freedom and to feel comfortable bringing their worst calls, I finally felt like I was a huge multiplier on the revenue team.
Nice. I love that. Yeah. And that alone, that's not just leveling up the pipeline, that's leveling up every aspect of the team working on it, right? So, and for those folks that are probably going to ask, what is MEDDIC? We'll link in the show notes for what it stands for. Really awesome framework. You're not the first person who's told me this. Getting it down to the 1% on the $500 million, that's impressive. Holy crap.
Yeah, when you told me that, I was totally blown away.
Yeah, that's impressive. I wish I like to be like 10% is my accuracy bar. I'm like, yeah, salespeople can get 10% accurate. That's freaking good.
No kidding.
Yeah. So awesome. Okay. So I love the fact that you guys are actually as a group, and it sounds like the culture is also just like, hey, this is what's going to happen. We're going to get out in front of it, and it is what it is. Not everything is perfect. Everyone's humans, right?
100%. We're a startup. We know that we need to do a lot of growing as a company, and I think the culture that we've built sort of attracts people that are in that growth mode. So another thing that's playing a big part that we're not really going to jump into today. But just to sort of bring it home, the last piece that's really enforcing, one of the cultural values that I was sort of alluding to is that growth piece, right? And you can't just talk about, oh, we're a company that wants to help you grow. You actually have to sort of, put your money where your mouth is. And so part of that is the career and skills planning, right? And so that's looking at sort of every 90 days. Again, it's a bottoms up thing. It can't just be me sitting here and saying, all right, Sujin, you got to work on this. Your cold calls, you need to focus on that. Your emails sloppy, blah, 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 blah. If it's me sitting there and just dumping, here's all the terrible things that I've seen about you that you're doing wrong, that's going to be a terrible meeting, right? That's going to be you coming out of that going like, oh man, I didn't realize how much I sucked. And so what we want to do is focus on what does the rep believe that they need to work on, right? So really working with them to say, okay, where are the biggest areas? And obviously we're going to help shape that. And we've got some assessments that we do, and we've got some ways of helping them sort of discover that. But really it starts with like, to really, from what I found, to really have any impact on them, it's got to tie into what their future goals are, right? Whether they're personal or professional goals, right? So I always like to start those with sort of future career goals. A couple of friends of mine like to have the reps come up with sort of their mission statement, right? So what do you do? How do you think about this role? When you wake up in the morning, sort of, why do you like coming into work? What do you want to be known for here? What fuels you, right? And they actually, they'll get them to print these out. And then basically looking at what are the SMART goals, right? That we can enact this quarter that are going to help us make an impact, right? And here's what we'll remind them of, here's what the team's plan. And so we'll have done this as a team. So as a revenue team, as a company, right? And so they kind of cascade down a little bit, but here's what we've come up with as a revenue team, right? Here's here's what your quota is. So obviously, a couple of the plan is going to be centered around there. And then the third component is like, what is that career plan? This quarter, how are we going to ensure that you're making progress, right, towards the goals that really mean something to you, right? And so those are the kind of big ones. It's the figuring out what the career goals are, figuring out what their internal mission statement is, figuring out what their like short-term 90-day career goals are. And then there's the kind of squishy goals that don't really fit perfectly into a 90-day cycle, right? So it's things that you could be working on that are going to be a little bit longer, like your ability to delegate and let go, right? It could be your voice, right? And your phone voice and moving away from that sales guy voice who talks like this, and you're always trying to like, oh yeah, that's awesome. Great question. This kind of thing. And like slowing it down a little bit. Those things you can't really, it's hard to have a SMART goal around them because it's something that's going to be a couple year project. Right. And so just making sure that we're not just managing to the short term and saying, hey, this meeting is all about your short-term goals and the things that you're trying to achieve this quarter. And it's all about your revenue and your commission check and what you can do for me right now. It's using that to sort of bookend it with, okay, we're starting out with what your career goals are. Let's see what you can do to have an immediate impact in the next 90 days. And then let's see what you can do, what you need to do in order to sort of tie your career goals into, or what you need to do to ramp up for that sort of next step in your career. Like, what are those long-term squishy goals? And so with that sort of framework, coupled with the weekly coaching that they're getting and the call review and the pipe review and the design and like all the design thinking that we're doing around the outbound labs, that's how we've been able to keep it fresh. It's not the only way. And I promise you, if there's anything that I know, it's that we have so much more work to do. Things are going to continue changing, and I imagine they're going to start accelerating. And so we're hoping to build the structures that are going to help us keep up with all that acceleration that's coming.
I love that. And how often with this growth kind of framework and coaching system, how often are your people on your team leveling up? Like, is it like 6 months, 12 months, years? There's no right or wrong. I was just curious to see, how that's happening.
Yeah, I think it depends on the team. On our sales team, it's probably like we have a sort of, I think it's a 90 day, you go from level 0 to level 1, which means you're not fired. And there's a few other things. I'm being a little bit sarcastic about it, but level 0 to level 1, and then level 1 to level 2 can take 6 to 12 months, depending. And so that's like SDR1 to SDR2. I can't remember what we call it, but that's roughly what it is. And then you can kind of go the guru track and like try and be the best SDR. You can try and progress into an account exec role. You can try and move into a customer success role, or you can, move on to the management role. The one thing that was really important to us is that there was the guru track and the manager track, because there's great people that want to be managers and there's great people that don't want to be managers. And we just wanted to make sure that both people were taken care of in any level up plan that we had.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. That's awesome. I love the system. I love that there's execution is one part of the overall system, and that there's a lot more thought put into the design and the process. Then there's execution, and then there's the coaching. But my interpretation was the feedback loop and the leveling up that you get, and that just going through cycles of this. I can imagine every 90 days somebody's like taking that, like, I feel like the Super Mario reference. They get a mushroom and they just become Big Mario, right? Mm-hmm. So that's an awesome system. So and you walk through a bunch of this stuff. What didn't I ask you about? I think that's always important, to just open-ended, like getting better at prospecting.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really great question. I mean, I think one of the things that certainly that we've seen is around email deliverability. It's getting harder and harder to move forward with bad behaviors. And what I mean by that is the old sort of the people that send like 500,000 emails a month and just go for the like 0.00001 response rate. That model doesn't work anymore. We certainly see it. It's more prevalent than you might think. But I think one of the common themes that we've seen over the last 2 years is that it's not just about the inbox fatigue of the people that are receiving the emails. it's Google themselves and Office or Microsoft themselves that are sort of upping the game with their spam filters. And I think the number one thing that they're looking for is engagement, right? Which is why sending the right emails at the right time for the right reasons to the right people and getting as refined as you can, right? It is going to save your life, because if you are sending, if you're, back in the day, I'll be honest, I was lazy about it. I'd say, yeah, I know there's probably 10 good people on this.
Because you could get away with it, right? That was what worked.
Yeah. If there's 10 good people on this list of 1,000, that's great. I'll send an email and those 10 people will reply and I'll book calls with them. Right. And your conversion rates are pretty good. Now you can't, those numbers don't make sense anymore. So you really have to be thoughtful about your approach ahead of time.
Absolutely. Yeah. I can't agree more. The deliverability, the technical elements, email providers just getting smarter. And not that just they're getting smarter, they actually work together. A lot of these guys on the back end. So they have shared systems that can identify spam. And there's really, the big thing is the sender reputation is so important these days. Mm-hmm. You can't get that back once you lose it. That's the thing. It's like, you have to pretty much start over and then crawl your way up to some volume. So you might as well be on good behavior. And it's not like it's the smallest thing that kind of gets it, mm-hmm. but it's a series of bad behavior, and it's easy to forget and brush it under the rug, but the email providers never forget. They never forget. They're watching you.
And ramping up a new domain is so challenging, right? Like,
it's a 90-day thing just to be able to send like 75 to 100 emails out and get good deliverability. But it depends also on personalization, right? If you're sending the exact same email out, probably you're never going to get back up anymore, right? You just haven't had enough usage. If you start to personalize it, get engagement, all that stuff, it can be faster. But yeah, I mean, definitely a very, very big factor, right? It's not just doing all the right things, it's making sure you avoid all the bad things. That's kind of what I got out of what you were saying on deliverability. That's like one key element, but there's probably 4 or 5 other things. And I think the amount of time people spend on prospecting versus executing on delivering and sending your things needs to increase
100%.
As a whole. Yeah.
Totally. Couldn't agree. It's not like gone are the days where you can just buy a list, send it to everybody, and then expect a reasonable response rate. You have to be a lot more thoughtful about your approach.
Yeah, and absolutely.
I like what you said about personalization, because it's a natural throttle, right? If you've got to personalize every single first email you send, it's very hard to send 1,000 emails in a day. So yeah, you sort of throttle yourself that way and hopefully keep within the engagement limits that all these providers are looking for.
Yeah. And there's no magic number. So like everyone out there, like watching, don't go look for a magic number. We've sent, and I'm sure you guys have sent lots of emails. I think we're at about 100 million now. Email sent, and like deliverability is something that like our company meets about and chats about daily. And we've got all these, different stats and things we monitor. And I mean, it is a beast. So something very, very important just to make sure you're always on the safe side, because the other side there's no coming back from. But anyways, Collin, I really appreciate your time. Thank you for walking through your awesome three kind of part process from design, execution, coaching. Where can people find you if they want to learn more?
So we are Predictable Revenue. I'm Collin at Predictable Revenue. I've got a podcast you can check out. It's the Predictable Revenue Podcast. We've had 100 guests, over 100 guests on. When I was talking about MEDDIC, we had Jamie Buss on the show. She came on, we spent an hour and a quarter, and she walked me through her whole system. It was probably one of the most enlightening hour and 15 minutes I've spent as a salesperson. So I highly recommend check that out if what I said was interesting. That's awesome. I'm going to link that in the show notes. And also on my drive home tonight, I'm going to be listening to that podcast. So thanks for that. Thanks for that tip. Thanks, Sujin.